Between all the sponsored listings and the weirdly named brands you've never even heard of, picking a new watch on Amazon can be pretty overwhelming, especially if you want one that doesn't suck. Now, I've already tried buying watches based on the Amazon's Choice or overall pick label, and the results were mixed to say the least. Yeah, I won't be going near Olevs again, I'll tell you that much. So, like with many products, you may feel tempted to scroll to the top of the page and sort by average customer review instead. I mean, how wrong can hundreds of people be, right? Right? Well, today, I guess we're going to find out. I've bought 5 of the highest rated men's watches on Amazon to see if they're truly worth the hype, or are in fact overpriced junk that you should skip completely. These watches vary from about £30 or about $40 to well over 200, and all sit at the top of the very first page of filtered results with hundreds of 5-star reviews apiece. If you're into watches at all, you may have a few guesses about what you're going to see. I guarantee those guesses are almost certainly wrong. You won't believe what some people are actually buying. I'll have them all linked in the video description if you do want to check any of them out, as well as any better alternatives that I may or may not be mentioning throughout this video. And I've tried to be fair to these watches. They're all presented in the best way possible with help from our sponsor dailywatch.com, whose beautiful watch storage and display products will be housing our Amazon competitors today. Run by the same team behind the world's largest wristwatch social media account, their curated selection of watch accessories includes everything from personalized watch rolls and mats to elaborate display stands and robots, so you can store and showcase your watches with pride. One of my favorite recent additions is this new Moreland watch stand, whose cushioned centerpiece can be easily slid out and interchanged with their more typical watch rolls, so you can switch your current active watch in a matter of seconds. Daily Watch's holiday sale has just started too, so if you want to treat yourself or a loved one, head to the link in the video description, and if you're seeing this at any other time of the year, you can still grab a great deal by using code Ben's Watch Club via the link in the description to get 10% off at dailywatch.com. They've got over 50,000 satisfied customers and a super strong review score too, from proper watch nerds who actually know what they're talking about. That's dailywatch.com, you're sure to be impressed. But will I be impressed with the first of our highly rated Amazon watches? I suppose the only logical place to start is the lowest cost watch, which also happens to be the very first on the results page, the Casio W-218H, selling from about £25 to £45 most of the time on Amazon UK, about $30 to $40 on Amazon US. This model boasts Amazon's #1 top rated badge, with over 1,300 reviews and an average rating of 4.8 out of 5. So in theory, it should be the cream of the crop. And well, I lucked out here because this is a watch I already own. Yeah, I bought this one back in 2021 for a large-scale video that never ended up transpiring, so I already know a fair bit about it. Mine is dark grey, which seems much rarer these days for some reason, but functionally it's still identical to all the other colors you can find on Amazon. So everything I'm saying here should still apply. What you get here is pretty simple. It's a fairly chunky digital watch that looks quite like a G-Shock, but is a good amount cheaper and a little more compact. A wannabe Shock, if you will. Now, unsurprisingly, the 218H doesn't have the shock-resistant properties of the proper G-Shock line, but its size and specs do still place it in a middle ground between the Gs and the lower-cost smaller digitals like the F91W. So I can see the overall appeal here. It's fairly wide at 43mm, but has a comparatively tiny 44mm lug-to-lug, and it's also reasonably slim at 10.9mm, making it probably the smallest looking 43mm watch I've ever covered. Here's a look at it on my small 6¼ wrist, and it kind of fits me, aside from the strap, but we'll get to that in a moment. Overall, I think this one is fairly good looking for a digital too, with reduced visual clutter compared to many other Casios, and proportions that at least give it a chance of fitting under a cuff or two. The specs are a similar story. As well, it's mostly the same as the lowest cost Casios, with full resin construction and a simple module with just the stopwatch and alarm features. It does have some obvious improvements, including a larger display, a slightly elevated 50-meter water resistance rating, and a strap that has G-Shock-like rear bumpers that ensure the strap always contacts surfaces like the ground before the caseback does, in the event of accidental drops. The illuminator backlight here is also pretty good, despite being a simplistic side light system. It's much brighter than the similar setup used on many of the entry-level digitals, so you can actually read the time in the dark, and in general, the large display here is easily readable at a glance. It doesn't suffer from the ghosting that often hinders some cheap digitals. Whether that rings true for the negative display versions remains to be seen. Previous inverse display Casios I've tested have typically had inferior visibility across the board, even when it comes to the backlights, so I'd probably steer clear of those unless you're primarily wanting one as a stylistic choice. It does at least have a good 7 7-year advertised battery life, with my unit already exceeding the 4-year mark and it's still going strong. Yeah, I really should make that video, shouldn't I? So as a practical option, the 218H is a commendable choice, and I expect it more than does the job for most people. However, there are some small issues worth noting. Firstly, while the band is solid and has a great number of adjustment holes, the first 3 or 4 are effectively obsolete, as if your wrist is this small, you'll be getting a massive amount of overhang on the rather long strap, which the keeper can't contain. This just looks sloppy, and you may end up catching it on stuff too, so if you've got a skinny arm, you'll want to look elsewhere, even if the rest of the watch may fit. The only other real downside is competition, and in some ways cannibalizing competition. It's not that this watch is bad or anything, but Casio simply has a lot of other G-Shock-like options in this price bracket, many of which have tangible performance advantages over the W-218H. The A1500WH, for example, looks even more like a G-Shock, with a larger rounded case, and can often be had for less money than the 218, despite offering objectively better performance. It's got a more readable display, boasts double the water resistance, and also packs in a host of additional functions to boot. The W800H, meanwhile, can also typically be had for less, and packs double the water resistance into a slightly smaller footprint than the 218, while matching its feature set. If you can deal with its Frankenstein-like appearance, the DW291H is also a much more robust choice in this price bracket. It offers a whopping 200 meters of water resistance, several more functions, mineral glass instead of plastic, and just generally feels much more substantial in the hands, making it the obvious choice if you prioritize durability above all else. All 3 of those also advertise a 10-year battery life too, exceeding the 218. But even with these caveats, I think the W218H is still deserving of its highly reviewed status. While less performant than some rivals, it offers a cleaner look than most alternatives, and is still durable enough for most people's day-to-day usage. While it wouldn't be my first choice, I can see why it would fit the bill for many. On the topic of billing, I guess we started with the cheapest watch, so we may as well move our way up in price order, eh? At £56, we have our next top-rated Amazon pick, and something completely different, that being this square dress watch from a brand called Eriksen. Now, I've been a full-time watch reviewer for almost 7 years, and I've never ever heard of this supposedly UK-based brand. Yet the watch bearing its name still looks awfully familiar. It's almost like I've seen this design before somewhere. Now, they're claiming that this Chatsworth here is British designed, and they also claim to combine high-quality components with good design and superb craftsmanship to create an accurate and robust timepiece. Now, the accurate part is true. This watch uses a Miyota quartz movement, which is reasonable, but everything else? They're straight up falsehoods. For starters, I know for a fact that this watch was not designed in the UK. And how do I know that? Well, because the Cartier tank exists. Indeed, this Eriksen is in fact a blatant copy of one of the most famous watches of all time, first designed and produced by Frenchman Louis Cartier way back in 1917. So unless they've got a time machine, they've done as much designing as I have hairstyling in the last few years. That's not to say this design is ugly. The Cartier tank is a really cool Art Deco icon, and this Eriksen rides its coattails, providing you with a similar from a distance look for a lot less money. Design deception aside, what about their claims of quality? I mean, this watch has an average review score that's higher than the last one at 4.9 out of 5, and then there's the claims about high quality components, superb craftsmanship, and a robust timepiece. So surely it must have some redeeming qualities. Well, those claims are pure marketing jargon. My local chip shop exhibits more craftsmanship than this cheap, but ironically still overpriced watch. For starters, while it looks like a Cartier from a distance, the case is an immediate red flag for anyone with any experience with watches. Something about it just looks and feels off. It's almost too shiny. And that's because it has what they're calling a silver-plated case, rather than the industry standard stainless steel cases that are increasingly common even at this low price point. Their choice of words here is highly misleading in my opinion, because I'm convinced this contains no real silver content at all. I'm pretty confident this silver plating is actually just silver colored plating, as the metal exhibits the hallmark blue glow and excessive reflectivity of cheap chrome plating, which typically contains rudimentary brass or zinc alloys hidden underneath. If you've got any real silver jewelry, you'll notice it's got a much warmer tone than this bluish watch case. To be clear, I'm not expecting the world for £56, far from it. In fact, chrome-plated watches are still fairly widespread at this price, and they're not inherently evil or anything, but to call a watch made from this a robust timepiece with high-quality components and superb craftsmanship is objectively untrue. These days, many higher quality stainless steel watches can be had from about £35 on sites like AliExpress, delivered to your door, and compared to steel, chrome-plated brass scratches more easily, is more susceptible to corrosion and rust, tends to tarnish faster, and usually looks cheaper, as it's trickier to achieve fine brushing and high polishing with. Unlike some brass Timex watches, this Eriksen isn't a particularly well-done outlier either. This unit has numerous lumps, bumps, and imperfections around the lug area, which have a nasty habit of scratching your wrist because they're so poorly manufactured and sharp. Those quality claims are doubly false when you can get a plethora of near-identical watches on AliExpress shipped to your door for around £10, or even less if you're a first-time customer. And I truly mean near-identical. I ordered 2 of these just to compare against, and they really do offer the same core design and the same spec sheet as the Eriksen for less than a fifth of the cost. If anything, the cheaper watches actually have better finished cases, without the rough corners present on the more expensive model. You'll notice they both share the exact same blue metallic hue, all but confirming my early suspicions about the case material, because these watches are correctly listed as chromed brass. Now, the proportions can vary a bit depending on which Cartier model they're trying to replicate. This Eriksen is just over 30mm by the way, but square watches always tend to wear much larger. What's more, the Eriksen can't even be submerged, as the case back offers no meaningful water resistance, so if you accidentally decide to, I don't know, wash the dishes or something, it can be done for. Oh, and I also popped the back off 2 of them. While the Miyota 2035 in the Eriksen is fine, it's no better than the PC20S from Seiko subsidiary TMI, found in the back of the Sander watch I opened, outside of having a slightly longer battery life. The croc effect strap is decent enough and should perform as intended, even if it's strangely wide considering the shape and size of this watch, but even with that considered, this Eriksen doesn't deserve the hype in the slightest. On the surface, a £50 Cartier lookalike sounds pretty tempting, but when you discover how poorly built it is, and an arguably better £10 alternative exists, well, it suddenly doesn't seem like such a great deal, does it? The £10 Sander watches are the ones that actually deserve the hype. At that low of a cost, the obvious downsides of these watches become much more tolerable. So how on earth has this very mediocre watch achieved such high review scores? Well, I suspect it's mainly down to lack of competition. For whatever reason, there are very few Cartier tank clones on Amazon, and no sign of the usual budget players such as Addy's Dive, Pagani Design, and San Martin, who each produce significantly better quality watches than this. Big brand alternatives, meanwhile, from the likes of Seiko, Rotary, and others, also seem to start past the £100 mark, leaving a sizable price vacuum that only this Eriksen currently fills. That factor becomes doubly powerful if you're unfamiliar with the original Cartier tank. When there are dozens of identical looking watches on a site like Amazon, you naturally begin to assume they must all be copies of something famous. But when there's only one watch with that design getting recommended, and you then read Eriksen's false British design claim, you may even be tricked into thinking it's just a beautiful, original, vintage-inspired design, which might increase its perceived value to the owner. Luckily, a comparably priced big brand alternative recently emerged in the form of the Casio MTP B190D. It's still a little tricky to find right now, but it offers a slightly more original take on this square design with stainless steel construction to boot. Still not my favorite watch, but it's clearly better than the Eriksen. Whether this Eriksen is just drop shipped or a private label design or something remains to be seen. It seems to have a slightly differently shaped crown to anything I could find on Alibaba or AliExpress. One that definitely hasn't been drop shipped is our next highly rated watch, the Invicta Pro Diver Scuba 20277. To dropship this, you'd probably require a fleet of space shuttles, as this thing is a planet in itself at a Goliath 50mm wide with a 188-gram weight that far exceeds most mechanical watches, despite only using a lightweight quartz movement and a silicone band. So yeah, straight out of the gate, this isn't for the faint-wristed, but Amazon does accurately state the size on the listing, so most people buying this watch are likely seeking out a huge watch anyway, which is fair enough. This one cost me just over £100, which is about 130 US dollars. Now, as far as design goes, this watch, and this brand as a whole, they're not really my cup of tea, but with an average rating of 4.8 from over 1,100 reviews, I may be in the minority with that opinion. They must have sold a lot of these watches. What I will say is that unlike the most popular Pro Diver models, which are rebranded Rolex copies basically, this piece at least has a unique original design, which definitely counts for something. It's a sort of diver chronograph hybrid, as you can see. For now then, I'll just focus on the features and construction of this Invicta, and let you be the judge on whether you appreciate the bold looks. As you'd hope for a watch of this size and weight, it is indeed a solidly built timepiece. You get a nice stainless steel case here, no blue chrome effect in sight, and you even get a fully ratcheting steel bezel that may not sound the best, but does feel pretty good in the hands. Overall, the finishing is basic but sufficient, with plain polished flanks and a simple brushed upper. While it doesn't look like anything fancy, it does feel like a bit of a beast, and I'd expect it to last pretty well over time. As you might expect, given the Pro Diver nomenclature and the screwed caseback, this watch offers a fair amount of water resistance at an advertised 100 meters, which is more than enough for most users. Though I will say the inclusion of both Pro Diver and Scuba in the name is pretty misleading, as despite the hefty appearance and impressive sounding rating, this watch wouldn't survive scuba dives to even modest depths. That's because wristwatch water resistance tests are conducted in static test chambers, which don't simulate the pressure changes of real-life swimming and diving motions. So while you'd have no trouble in a shallow swimming pool, at greater depths, this watch will struggle. Lower cost watches like Casio's MDV-106 Duro and even Invicta's standard Pro Diver models provide the full diver standard 200 meter water resistance rating, together with screw-down crowns for added protection. This one, meanwhile, has a standard push-pull crown, making water ingress a far likelier possibility. Master of the oceans? More like paddling pool professional. That's not the only contentious terminology used on this watch. They have two branded technologies baked into this Pro Diver, that being their Flame Fusion Crystal and Tritonite Night Glow Luminescence. Now, from what I can tell, these are essentially new names for generic products rather than special in-house materials. Flame Fusion Crystal is one I tested extensively in a previous video, and from those results, I concluded it's basically just a hardened mineral crystal with performance roughly matching other hardened mineral crystals like K1 and Seiko's Hardlex. Only this time, it's been naughtily named after the flame fusion process for creating synthetic sapphire, implying better performance despite falling well short of both sapphire and sapphire coated crystals in my scratch tests. It's worth noting that this still means it's marginally better than the standard mineral glass used by some rivals at this price, and such an upgrade is appreciated at the £100 mark. Now, it is possible to get sapphire crystals at this price, but those tend to be much hazier and often reduce legibility, as they usually lack a good anti-reflective coating to go along with it. So these hardened mineral crystals are a good middle ground for budget pieces. Tritonite, meanwhile, is just luminescent paint. Yeah, this watch has lume. You can see it briefly in the dark, but it lasts no better than the green stuff on most cheap Casio watches. It's blank in just a few minutes. Now, to be fair to Invicta, this is a common cost-cutting area for budget watches, so its bad performance is actually on par with many other big brand offerings. The difference is that most of those big brands aren't marketing their awful lume as more than it is. Indeed, Invicta's again named this to sound like something it isn't. They've made it read similarly to tritium, a radioactive gas used by some watch brands due to its permanent glow that doesn't require a light source. Tritonite shares none of these distinctive properties. It's just more bogus marketing slop. Many Chinese brands have cheaper watches with much better low-light performance that obliterates this Invicta. The strap, though, that's actually quite good. And wait for it, no, don't worry, there's no stupid name this time, but it does have a bizarre setup with two spring bars fitted to each strap, making it a nightmare to quickly change, but it does make the strap feel even more secure once it's in place. And the overall feel is decent, with sufficient pliability and plenty of adjustment holes for all wrist sizes. It's also wide enough to offset the huge bulk of the main case, so this watch doesn't bobble about nearly as much as you'd expect. And I imagine for someone with a bigger wrist, this watch could be quite comfortable, even if the giant 16mm thickness will prove troublesome for any long sleeves. As for the functions, well, it's using a Seiko VD53 quartz movement, so those pushers are fully functional. I emphasize that, as at first glance, they may not appear to be doing anything, but if you look closely, you'll see they actually operate the tiny chronograph hand on the lower subdial, rather than the bigger seconds hand that's doing the rounds there. Yeah, this layout is not too common and not my personal favorite, as you can barely see what the pushers are controlling, but it does sidestep one of the frustrations of many quartz and mecha quartz chronographs, that being that they can look dead when the chronograph hand isn't running. This Invicta has a persistent tick, which can be quite assuring. A minor functional gripe, though, as you may have noticed, is that the minute and hour hands are so close in size that you could misread the time at a glance. Despite this, I still think this Invicta is a fine watch that still has some commendable strengths. If you're just after a chunky, durable, loud watch, this will work, and it's not got any huge downsides so long as you've got a wrist that can accommodate it. Does it live up to the huge review scores, though? In my opinion, not a chance, especially with all the weird clickbait naming schemes and than over-promises. In certain areas, this watch is still handily beaten by its bigger brand or Chinese brand competition. The Casio Duro does pretty much everything this watch does, with nicer case finishing, double the water resistance, and a more reasonable but still large size for around half the cost. It's got an unbeatable reputation and also looks more expensive. The Vostok Amphibia, meanwhile, sells for a similar price to this Invicta and offers an extensive military service history combined with legendary water resistance. It also offers extensive modding options and a near limitless selection of designs, including plenty that are nice and bling bling if that's what you're looking for. I'd pick both of those divers before this Invicta, but it's not necessarily a bad watch. On the topic of bling bling, that phrase also applies to the next watch I painfully purchased for £218.78, or closing in on $300 US, the Maserati Competizione. This watch has an average review score of 4.8 stars from 85 reviews. And wow, some people must be easily impressed, that's all I can conclude, because this thing is like a £200 kick to the balls. And that isn't me being snobby, I promise. Based on my experience, I can't see a world in which this Maserati watch costs more than about £15 per unit to manufacture. In fact, they may have allocated more money to the box than the watch itself, despite even that having a major shortcoming. Yeah, it's got quite a nice leatherette outer and faux suede lining, but it arrived completely mutilated by a flawed hinge mechanism that doesn't hold the lid level and seems almost designed to cause such damage. And really, that could act as a metaphor for this whole package. Designed to look flashy and luxurious from afar, but the second you look closer, that illusion gets completely shattered. For starters, the in-hand feel of this Maserati is atrocious. The bracelet is impossible to ignore with its stereotypical tinny, jangly rattle that's the horological equivalent of nails on a chalkboard. This has no place on a £200 watch, with its folded, hollow link construction akin to bracelets found on most dirt cheap watches, and even that is being generous. This sub £40 Addies dive, for example, has entirely solid steel links in its bracelet with a much nicer clasp to boot. Zero rattling, a much more substantial feel. Oh, and the clasp here is a disaster too. It looks okay on the outside with a generous 4 micro adjustment holes, but good luck getting it to fit when you'll have a wrestling match simply opening it. This security flap was so fixed in place that I scraped my nail bed several times trying to remove it, and eventually had to resort to just wrenching it off with a case back removal tool. It seems okay now, but wow, are those some luxury level tolerances. It's worth pointing out actually that despite the name, Maserati, the car maker, has very little, if anything, to do with the manufacture of their own watches. These are in fact produced by the Morelato Group, who have a phenomenal reputation and also make other esteemed brands such as Sector No Limits, Philip Watch, and Blue Spirit, just to name a few. Most of those look to be built to the same tacky standard as this Maserati, which has a pitiful spec sheet for a watch costing £200. It has got stainless steel construction, which you'd hope for as a bare minimum, and it also offers a 10-bar water resistance rating with a screw-down crown, which is good, but over the dial, you're left with a flat piece of mineral glass with no anti-reflective coating. You can get far more scratch-resistant sapphire crystals on numerous Casios, as well as other brands that retail for less than half the cost of this Maserati. Despite the appearance and the price, this watch isn't even a proper chronograph. No, it's a multi-function watch, so despite the 2 pushers, this watch can't actually time anything like a proper chronograph can. Under the hood is just a simple battery-powered quartz movement, in this case the Seiko Epson VX9J, which you can grab for under a tenner when purchased in bulk. This movement gives those pushers the ability to adjust the day and date displays respectively. 2 functions that a simple date wheel can already accomplish in most movements simply by using the watch's crown. I guess some of this may be a visual choice, perhaps the designer wanted to show the day and date on those subdials for whatever reason, even though it looks really similar to a normal chronograph. Even so, the Mecha Quartz chronograph movements you typically find at this price not only offer the same look with the added timing capabilities, but also have much nicer feeling pushers, as well as a smoother sweep to the chronograph hand that surpasses the usual 1 per second tick. Heck, you can even grab some fully mechanical chronograph movements at this price, which are another level of complexity entirely. I mean, there really is no comparison. To me, this multifunction movement feels like an entirely cost-centric inclusion, and the closer you look at those subdials, the worse things get. Indeed, this Maserati gets massacred under macro, with bare bones markers, flat hands, and the same basic tubular gold detailing that you find on watches at 1/10 of the cost. Oh goodness. It's not filthy at least, but it still looks very, very cheap, even compared to much lower cost chronographs from other lesser known brands. Now the blue undertone I actually quite like. It complements the gold coloured case relatively well with a rather nice sunburst, but that factor alone can't disguise its apparent transparent grocery store watch level of quality, observable even from a moderate distance. Aside from that, it's okay stylistically. It's not hideous, but it does look a bit like an owl wearing eye makeup, don't you think? The lume on this watch, by the way, isn't nearly as bad as I expected, but it is still below par for a watch at this price. Again, it gets trounced by alternatives that cost the same or even way less. Interestingly, many online commenters and even Google's AI overview claim that these Maserati watches are either made in Italy or made in Switzerland, which certainly makes them sound prestigious. Personally, I think that's bogus. When a watch brand is Swiss or Italian made, you never hear the end of it. They plaster that claim everywhere, including on the watch dial itself. But this Maserati has neither of those claims present. And if there's one thing I've learned over 7 years of watch reviewing, it's that the phrase Italian design usually means made in China, or some other Far Eastern country they'd rather not mention. Now, Maserati's manufacturer, the Maserati Group, loves to talk about in-house production of watches on their website, and that sounds impressive until you read their 2025 company profile, which tells a very different story. They proudly describe their Maserati branded watch strap production as made in Italy and their Philip watch line as Swiss made. But when it comes to everything else, including Maserati watches, there are no such claims. Rather, the document openly lists Maserati's subsidiaries in world-renowned manufacturing hubs like Hong Kong, Dongguan in China, and Bangkok. So their marketing might suggest you're getting a slice of Italian craftsmanship, but from what I can gather, they're almost certainly made in the Far East, just like every other fashion watch brand out there, all while technically being able to call their production in-house. And just like most fashion watches, this Maserati is a trash tier timepiece with a fancy brand name and an insane markup that will lose 70% of its value the second you press buy now. I can't say I'm surprised. That's not to say all Chinese-made watches are bad. In fact, some Chinese-made chronographs annihilate this Maserati in terms of price to performance, such as those from Addies Dive and Casio Edifice, which I'll link in the video description. At this price, it even gets trumped by other highly rated watches on Amazon that, for some reason, weren't listed as highly as this hunk of junk. That includes the Q Timex chronograph, which looks far more attractive and expensive, or some of Orient's solar chronographs, which look higher quality and, well, are higher quality in every manner, while offering solar charging functionality to boot. I mean, it's crazy to me that you can drop £220 on this Maserati, or for similar money, get your hands on some watch nerd staples like the Orient Bambino and Timex E-line, which offer much higher end looks and mechanical movements that also give you an elegant sweeping second hand. You could even opt for some of Bullover's entry-level precisionist watches, which boast one of the smoothest second hands in the world thanks to their advanced movement technology. Of course, you could go for the next watch on this list, the Coach Elliot, which cost me a comparable £207 or $232 with delivery factored in. And was this watch worth that price? Hell no. Now, the reasons why will become apparent in a moment, but I will say that on the surface, this watch certainly has some draws. It's a thin, gold-colored watch with a minimalist design and a shiny gold dial. I think that combination, especially the slimness, is always going to be popular, regardless of the level of execution. And this particular piece has an average review score of 4.9 stars from 61 reviews, so it's clearly landed well with the general public. Outside of that, it's also got another minor strength, that being the steel mesh bracelet, which is clearly better than that fitted to the Maserati watch, and thankfully doesn't feel like an empty can of beans this time. It's got the usual slide clamp mechanism for adjustments, and also matches the tone of the case pretty well. The only trouble is that half-decent bracelets like this tend to cost like 10 quid from China, and this watch is north of 200. Yeah, I've got some alternatives coming up that have all the same strengths as this Coach, but give you significantly more in every other area, so make sure you stick around for those. To be honest though, I knew exactly what I was in for when I googled Coach watches and found they were actually produced by Movado, a conglomerate that also makes watches for other fashion brands such as Movement, Hugo Boss, Lacoste, and Tommy Hilfiger, brands that I've already checked out that are renowned for their comically bad build quality. This Coach watch is no exception, and while it is perhaps a tad better than the Maserati overall, it still looks like what it is, a bare bones £15 watch with a Coach logo slapped on it, and that's no exaggeration. Here it is next to an £8 watch that I purchased from clothing retailer Primark a few years ago. And well, you can see why I draw such a comparison. While the colours are different, you can still see that the detailing and overall styling are remarkably similar. Some of the biggest giveaways are the flat, plasticky looking markers and hands, and the overall plainness of everything, including the steel case's surface that exhibits exhibits an entirely glossy finish, which is coincidentally the cheapest type to manufacture. It looks far closer to the Primark watch than to virtually any £200 model from brands that actually specialize in watches. And as for the Chinese brands at this price, well, that's a different conversation entirely. Now, while I doubt people are really buying this watch for its specs or features, those factors do provide further context as to just how cheaply made this watch is. Again, the crystal on this is just bottom tier mineral glass, at a price where more scratch resistant sapphire or hardened mineral crystals are the norm, so this glass will scratch over time, making your watch look worse. The back of the watch bears an inscription, ironically claiming it was crafted with careful attention to detail, function and performance, all while being laser etched onto a basic snapback case rear that gives this watch virtually no water resistance. You can't make this stuff up. Indeed, in watchmaking terms, 3 bar is the lowest rating typically assigned to any watch, and it's pretty much just a synonym for splash proof, meaning rain is about all it can handle. You'll notice the dirt cheap Primark watch has exactly the same style of case back. This coach also has no luminescence, so you can't read it in the dark, and while the bracelet is half decent, like with the Maserati, there are no quick release levers, which are a staple at this price point these days, so you'll need a dedicated spring bar tool just to change the bracelet, which, of course, you don't get in the box either. Needless to say, this watch is in no way deserving of its high price and review scores. If it were well below 100, it might be reasonable, but to sell for north of 200 is just pure insanity. Either their margins or operating costs are enormous if this is all they can offer. How pathetic. Thankfully, I have some absolute bangers to consider if you're after a stylish, thin watch, all from much better brands than Coach. A great direct alternative is the Sternglass Naus Quartz, which outright beats the Coach in every category for the same amount of money. Now, my footage here is the automatic version, but the Quartz offers the same award-winning Bauhaus-inspired design, just in a package that's as slim as the Coach. It's got an increased 5 ATM water resistance rating, a selection of higher quality quick-release bands or bracelets, and a double-dome sapphire crystal that's got a pretty capable anti-reflective coating. It comes in 2 sizes too, so it'll likely fit better. For a similar gold look, the Nixon Time Teller offers a comparable vibe for often around half that price or less. It also has 100 meters of water resistance, so you can actually submerge it if you want. If slimness is your main priority, Casio also has you covered for around £100 with their Edifice EFR S108D, which is wafer thin and much better built with a sapphire crystal. It looks like many more expensive sports watches, and the latest version is available with elaborate textured dials that up the ante even further. Casio's MTP B145D is also a good budget substitute with similar looks to the Coach for a fraction of the price, albeit it's designed specifically for smaller arms at 35mm. I mean, if you're already spending 200 quid, you may as well stretch for the likes of the Tissot Every Time, which is a Swiss-made watch from a famous brand, or even go for my favourite, the absurdly good Citizen Stiletto, also known as the Serato in some regions. Unlike the overpriced Coach, this Citizen is an engineering marvel, squeezing an eco-drive solar movement and a 3D ridged dial into a remarkable sub 5mm package. Indeed, this watch is so sleek, it's actually thinner than the strap attached to it, and it can be yours for roughly the same price. Madness, isn't it? You can learn more about it in the video on screen now, where it's got its own segment, and it's linked in the description alongside all of today's watches. And don't forget to access the special deal I've got with dailywatch.com for all your watch accessory needs.